In handicapping the Derby, as with any race, it's important to assess not only how fast each horse has already been, but how well they will run now. Thoro-Graph figures accurately address the first issue. But for the second one, we have to look at patterns, both historical ones and those for each individual horse. To get the answers, you have to ask the right questions. In the tables that follow, the top is defined as more than 1 point faster than the previous top. A pair is defined as within 1 point either way of the previous top. An off race is more than 1 point through 4 points worse than the previous top. And an X is more than 4 points worse. Every year at this time, we point out that when it comes to Derby preps, less is more. Those with only 2 starts as a 3-year-old are more likely to run a new top than those with 3 starts, although they are only a little more likely to at least pair their top. But the big drop-off comes with those that have made 4 or more starts prior to the Derby. Not only do very few run new tops, but more than half run X's. They are simply over the top before the Derby. And we are not the only ones that have figured this out. From 1995 to 2005, well over half the Derby starters had 4 or more preps. Since then, less than a quarter have. And the percentage coming in with just 2 starts has more than doubled. This year, the number with 2 preps will easily exceed those with 4 or more, a complete reversal. We also point out every year that the best short-term pattern to come in with is a pair of tops. That's especially true if you are looking for a new top. Coming in following a new top is almost as good if you are looking for a horse to at least run back to his last, as long as the top he just ran was not too big. There's an extreme drop-off if the recent top was 3 points or more, with only a few running another new top, and a real lot bouncing badly. The other thing that's interesting to note is how the amount of development from 2 to 3 affects how they run. Those with moderate development from their 2-year-old top to the pre-Derby top usually run a lot better than those that have already developed more than 4 points, which is not surprising if you think about it. The latter group has come a long way in a short time and are less likely to have another forward move in the short term. Very few of them run new tops, and more than half run X's. Finally, keep in mind, as we say every year, that with a 20-horse field going 2 turns, there can be monster ground loss swings. Every path out from the rail on each turn is worth a length at the finish, or 1/2 Thoro-Graph point at this distance. If your horse races just outside another horse around 2 turns, he has to run a full point better to break even. And there will be horses caught 4 and 5 wide, possibly wider. Turning to the Derby, Bot Express jumped to a new top in February, then went forward again in the Florida Derby to a figure that makes him borderline competitive. But it also represents 7 points of development from his 2-year-old top, making pairing up possible, but another forward move very unlikely short term. By my standards, was slow until his last, when he broke through, to make him a little less slow relative to these. He would need another jump just to become relevant, and that's unlikely. Code of Honor established a strong 2-year-old top going long, got back to it to win the Fountain of Youth, then paired up last time. The good news is he is coming into this off a pair of tops and could go forward. The bad news is he hasn't developed at all since last year, and there are many in the field now faster than him. At this point in his career, Velasquez often is content to stay outside, as we saw in last year's Oaks. And riding a closer in a very big field, that could be a problem. Noble Mission is a full brother to Frankel, and it will be interesting to see what this guy does on grass. Country House established a solid 2-year-old top and recently went into his last with the pair of tops pattern that is so productive for spring 3-year-olds. The pattern did pay off with a new top that day, but now he's coming in following 4 prep races and that new top. The necessary forward move is unlikely, but we like this one for down the line. Cutting Humor has an erratic, bouncy pattern. He's got a couple of figures that make him borderline relevant, but the weak pattern makes a new top unlikely at this point. Game Winner has a great pattern, with every figure as good or better than the one before it. His last was a slight new top and one of the strongest figures in this race. He was wide and earned a much better figure than the winner. So now he comes into the Derby with two preps, strong figures, moderate development, and a very slight forward move that is close to being a pair for a trainer who has done okay in this race. Game Winner is close to a sure thing to run well, but in terms of winning, the issues are Rosario and this colt's history of ground loss. He has generally been the widest horse, and in a 20-horse field, that would be a problem. Gray Magician earned a better figure than the winner in Dubai, but overall has mediocre figures and an erratic pattern. Pete Miller is something of a magician himself, but for this one, hitting the board would be quite a feat. High Cal jumped to a new top in the one-turn Gotham, then went back a little last time. If he runs back to his top, he's a borderline contender, but the pattern is shaky, and there are distance questions too. Daher's runners have been 2 points better sprinting so far, and the good sibling was strictly a sprinter. Improbable is similar to stablemate Game Winner in that he has never gone back. He also has a strong two-year-old pattern with a slightly slower top and the same two starts at year 3 with a faster top, the result of a bigger but manageable jump. The horse this guy resembles at this point is American Pharaoh, though he has already developed a couple of points more from 2 to 3. Since Improbable's top came at the longest distance he has tried so far, we're not going to worry about his pedigree, and the wide trips came before a good rider switch. This is the second fastest horse going in, and we like him quite a bit. But who's this Baffert guy? Long Range Toddy was slow last year, and when he finally got a little faster this year, he bounced, so he's not for us. Note he won in March by getting a rail trip. Master Fencer isn't fast enough to make an impact here. Maximum Security exploded in the last of 3 sprints and essentially paired up to win the Florida Derby. Yes, this is essentially the pair of tops pattern. The 6-point jump to the first of the pair makes it a weak one. On the plus side, he could save ground on the lead, a possible advantage of several lengths in a big field, and he has service on his side. This one is, for us, the trickiest call in the field. Omaha Beach shows signs of the 2-year-old of being on his way to a good grass career, though he ended the year a maiden. He went forward when switched to dirt in January, again in his next, then paired up at Oaklawn. That left him with the pair of tops pattern going into the Arkansas Derby, and it paid off with a jump to a big new top. That's the fastest figure anyone here has run, and if he runs that well again, he's a likely winner. But there's a reason we do all those studies. And this guy comes out on the wrong end of every single one of them. First of all, even if you disregard the 2-year-old races because they were on grass and use his January figure as his 2-year-old top, he's already developed 6 points. And we're not so sure it's right to overlook his 2-year-old top. Second, he's coming off a big jump to a new top. And finally, of course, he's already had 4 starts this year. Each of those 3 things individually is better than 50-50 produce an X, on top of which, for the first time, he'll be running on just 3 weeks rest. It's tough to like this one as one of the favorites. Pluska Parfait is similar to Gray Magician, who also ran in Dubai, where this one won by saving ground. Both have an erratic pattern and come into this race a little short of competitive. Roadster ran a couple of good sprint figures last summer, then apparently had throat surgery. He is similar to stablemate's Game Winner and Improbable, except 2 or 3 points slower, both last year and this. He only was able to win the Santa Anita Derby due to saving ground. Game Winner's wide trip earned a much better figure. 2 preps with this pattern should yield a good performance, but one much more likely to earn a check than Rose's. Spinoff got to a moderate top last year at Saratoga before they stopped on him. His dam got much better at 3, and so did this guy right away. Then had a very wide trip in Louisiana, where he went forward to run a much better figure than the winner. It's hard to know what this Colts limit is, and he's had plenty of time since the top, so a new one is possible. There's also a major rider switch. Franco was more likely to save ground than Velasquez at this stage of his career. This is a long shot that could get a piece of this. Tacitus is out of a terrific race mare who didn't race at 2. He wasn't that fast last year, but got much faster earlier this year with the addition of Lasix at a time Mott's horses were really firing. He went forward again last time to a figure that makes him competitive here. The good news is he's only had 2 preps, but he's come a long way already with 7 points of development, so a pair up is possible, but an immediate forward move is unlikely. Tax jumped out of his skin late last year with the addition of Danny Gorgon and Lasix. He had some trouble in his next race, but won despite going back a few points. Then, with a couple of months' rest, got back to his top. This gelding has already far outrun his siblings, but this is a good pattern for at least a pair-up, and a new top is not out of the question. He's live at a price for at least a piece of this. Vacoma has the best 2-year-old top of any of these, achieved in his second start. He comes in with only 2 preps, and they are a pair, but not a pair of tops. This is not a healthy pattern, but if he's going to go back to his top, it's pretty much now or never. Because of that 2-year-old effort, this one does fit on number power, and he does have Castellano. War of Will had a great 2-year-old pattern of development with a new top in his first dirt try. He got even better at fairgrounds and paired up before apparently having something go wrong early in his last start. If that stinker is excusable, this is a very live horse. And since it's been almost 4 months since his first 1.5, he's not limited to that level. Supposedly he is working well, and Gaffleone is on his way to being a top rider. Win-Win-Win has been fast from the start and threw a big sprint figure in January. It's hard to tell whether the lesser efforts in his last 2 are reactions to the big effort or because of added distance. But it's tough to like a horse in a derby coming off 2 races that far off his top. There will be a chance to bet this guy at some point. As we have noted, horses are now coming into the Derby with fewer preps, which makes it more likely they will run their race and that a higher percentage than before will run new tops. This in turn makes it harder to totally dismiss horses. As usual, we will divide the Derby into 4 groups. The D group we can't see using anywhere, even far underneath. By my standards, Grey Magician, Long Range Toddy, Master Fencer, and Pluska Parfait comprise this group. The next group has those that we don't love, but it wouldn't be a total shock to see one get a check. In the C group, we have Boat Express, Code of Honor, Country House, Cutting Humor, High Cow, and Win-Win-Win. The B group is the largest this year. We are putting Maximum Security and Omaha Beach here not because we think they're likely to run well, but because they are both fast enough to win without improvement if they do. The other 6 we do think will run well. They are Roadster, Spinoff, Tacitus, Tax, Vacoma, and War of Will. And it is no coincidence that 5 of those 6 are coming in with just 2 preps. This group is so large and so strong, it's very hard to use the C group, even underneath, in exotics. But the A group is obvious. Game Winner and Improbable both come into the Derby with very strong figures already, both last year and this, and great patterns. It's Baffert again. And they are both coming in off a pair of losses, so they won't be that short. The bottom line is that the draw made some of the decisions for us. We're not going to use Roadster from out there. He's not that fast, and would need a new top just to get in range. We will still use Spinoff a little. He'll be much longer and has more positional speed, and Franco. If we use Omaha Beach at all, it'll be just with the ones we really like and no more than others in the B group that will be much longer. The other 5 all drew well in the inside 8 stalls. War of Will and Tax especially become very live at big prices. Yes, they could get in some trouble down there, but if they save ground, they're already fast enough to hit the board. But the biggest swing came in our 2 A horses. Rosario has been wide on game winner in much smaller fields, and it's a little scary to think about what he might do from post 16 coming from behind in a 20-horse field. We will still use that one, but Improbable, on the other hand, drew great. He becomes a clear pick in a derby that has some really attractive possibilities in the exotics.